The loss of the African state of mind. Education has often been touted as the gateway for Africa from the shackles of poverty. An investment in Africa's future generation to bring about the needed change and transformation, to shed some light in the heart of darkness, a ladder from which Africa could climb from deep down the valleys of poverty to the peak of the mountain of prosperity. The importance of education is highlighted by the second of the 8 Millennium Development Goals agreed upon by the United Nations to ensure that by 2015, children everywhere, boys and girls alike, will be able to complete a full course of primary schooling. This is not the first time we have heard about the indispensable nature of education and its declaration as a fundamental human right. Indeed, Education for All was launched in 1990 with international agencies such as the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, and the World Bank, among others, spearheading the effort to educate all citizens in every society. Such efforts have materialized in some developing countries. In fact, there has been some form of universal primary education system established in Burundi, in Ghana, Ethiopia, Kenya, Mozambique, Malawi, Tanzania, and Uganda, to name a few. This initiative has resulted into a dramatic surge in primary school enrollment. In sub-Saharan Africa today, enrollment has increased by 50% since 2000. Public expenditure as well has grown by an average of 7% per year. While the excitement often revolves around the millions of students being enrolled, it is critical that we look beyond the statistics and numbers and conduct a result-oriented evaluation. In other words, we continue to spend our resources on quantity, but spend little time evaluating and fixing the quality of our education. As an example, providing any form of food aid to a famine-stricken region is crucial. However, providing a balanced diet on nutrition is a result-oriented approach that will diminish the occurrence of malnourishment and disease. Likewise, a child can go to school and live without getting an education, resulting in malnourishment of the mind. Though education has opened doors and improved the livelihoods of many Africans, the continent as a whole has failed to break away from the shackles of poverty. Considering the amount of resources that have been invested towards this cause, an average of 5% of gross domestic product spent on education today in sub-Saharan Africa, it is legitimate to argue that the overall expectations have not been met. We are in a state of reaping diminishing returns. Our marginal gains from education are in decline. Education in Africa today is not preparing students to succeed in domestic economies. We have growing unemployment. Our domestic product is stagnant. Growth is stunted. This is why I pose the question, what went wrong? The failure of education to maneuver Africa over the hump has mostly been a result of two weaknesses. First, what we're teaching, and secondly, how we're teaching. Many who have attained an African education will tell you that it is a contest of memorizing and regurgitating facts and figures. There is less emphasis on creativity and critical thinking. The curriculum is also primarily made up of Western-based material and concepts. Eurocentric education is the term often used, though it doesn't do justice to this phenomenon in today's world. It is worth noting that Western education is not bad. In fact, basic science and mathematics have a universal application. Where we go wrong is the applied curriculum, which is often too distant from the realities of the African people. Students who go through our education system are only equipped with a hammer, and they have developed a tendency to view every problem as a nail. This is not an argument against teaching a Western style of education, and neither am I making a case for Afrocentrism. If our goal is to equip a population with a knowledge base that will enable them to optimize the resources and tools at their disposal, it is imperative that we focus the content of our education on the challenges of our immediate surroundings. Many will argue that the world has changed with globalization and the technological age. That's true. The world is rapidly becoming a global village. The world has changed. However, ladies and gentlemen, resources continue to be skewed and are not trickling down as fast to make the technological breakthrough and shared knowledge beneficial for the developing countries. We have millions of highly qualified and educated Africans sitting in limbo from lack of job opportunities. Our immediate complaint is always dissatisfaction with our governments for lack of job creation. However, the fundamental failure and root cause of this conundrum is teaching the wrong material and an education system that often fails to foster independent thinking. I can still recite some of the material I learned in school about the prairies of North America and the Rhinelands of Europe. Towards the end of secondary school, I was an expert on how a plantation on the prairies operated, but I had no clue about the state of agriculture in my country. We sat through numerous lectures on how combine harvesters operated, agriculture techniques that allowed maximization of production during harsh winters, among other modern agriculture practices. Why are we teaching African farmers how to manage their farms during winter? When is the last time we had a snowstorm in sub-Saharan Africa? As I speak today, many countries in Africa, such as Uganda, are suffering from extreme food shortages. People are surviving and living on 1 meal a day, while others sleep on an empty stomach. This has been attributed to unpredictable seasonal changes. The drought has been severe, and when it rains, soil erosion is another barrier to reckon with. All this is happening while we have millions who have been thoroughly taught and educated about modern agriculture techniques, good crop husbandry, and soil conservation, with case studies such as the Tennessee Valley Project, which I remember very well. However, none of this knowledge trickles down to the local farms. The same applies to other disciplines such as history and literature, where I can only recall Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart as the only novel we covered in literature by an African author. The foundation of an African education is so flawed that by the time students attend institutions of higher learning, the mind is already malnourished. A knowledge vacuum has been created between school and real life. This phenomenon could have larger implications than immediate failure to turn knowledge into production on the local scale. The concept of brain drain is often talked about as accounting to the diminishing returns of free universal primary education funded by many African governments. If you are teaching a student how to operate a plantation in the Western world, they will try to find a job in the Western world to apply that knowledge. Likewise, if we are teaching nuclear physics in our universities, it should not come as a surprise that students in this field are opting out to search for greener pastures where this knowledge and expertise can be put to good use. Why should an African with a doctorate in nuclear physics hang around Burundi for the rest of his life? Why should a Kenyan studying astronomy aspire to work in Nairobi instead of securing a position with NASA? We're teaching our children the skills of engineering when we have no cars for them to fix. The African continent is becoming a production line for experts who have no clue how to solve African problems. Educate your people so that the West can employ them is a flawed policy. We're even importing mosquito nets from nations that have no mosquitoes. We're importing matchsticks from Asia to light a fire, which 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, who inhabited sub-Saharan Africa, had the skill set to make. They had a skill set to make fire 50,000 years ago, and we're importing matchsticks. How on earth do we expect to jumpstart our economies and raise the poverty threshold in our nations when we lack the creative mindset and expertise to solve local problems? How do we expect to lift the threshold? What are the solutions then? How can we fix our education and remove the knowledge vacuum? First, we need to institute an outcomes-based approach by asking the question, what do we want to accomplish? What do we want to accomplish? Overhauling the current system and creating a curriculum that would primarily focus on the needs of our society. Educating the individual as a part of society with purpose, not simply for the sake of educating. Secondly, it is imperative that we engage students in class and implement activities that encourage creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, rather than just listening to the teachers, copying notes, and reciting facts in their assessments and exams. Educating an individual as a free individual. Thirdly, making community service and independent learning projects a requirement rather than simply spoon-feeding students. Making it a requirement rather than simply spoon-feeding students. This would ignite their creativity and foster understanding of their surroundings. Point number 4. Highly qualified teachers are a necessity for any successful education system. As the knowledge vessels, it is imperative that they are competent and are able to constructively guide students through the quest for knowledge by asking the right questions channeled towards problem solving. Competent teachers. Fifth, we need to provide more resources for career guidance. Students are often dragged into programs simply based on the points they score rather than what they are passionate about. Providing a platform for students to research and think about their career opportunities is quintessential. Resources are often wasted, with students acquiring degrees from useless course material that hardly benefits their competitive advantage in the job market. Point number 6. We need to increase access to oases of knowledge. We need facilities such as public libraries and computers to lift the knowledge threshold across our society. Point number 7. We need to cultivate a culture of reading and writing at an early age. Point number 8. Funding or providing incentives and promoting research at universities and institutions of higher learning, particularly on projects that affect the livelihoods of our people. And finally, the government has to show faith in our professionals. Government officials and the wealthy often fly out to get healthcare services from abroad and often educate their children in foreign schools. It is indeed a disturbing trend that foreign expatriates are often paid large sums of money to build roads and other infrastructure projects while ignoring our locally educated and trained professionals. We continue to ignore our locally trained professionals. We have lived for thousands of years on our lands and should focus on becoming experts in our affairs first. Much as we still have to significantly invest in programs that improve access to education, it is equally important to also focus on the quality of education being delivered. We can cherry pick what we need from the Western school of thought, while spending the majority of the curriculum developing the African state of mind. It is imperative that we keep an eye on the global dynamics while reigniting the flame of the local expertise. We need to continue thinking global while acting locally. Education is the key to success, but quality education will open doors and windows of opportunity to alleviate the loss of the African state of mind and in the process propel our nations to prosperity.